Hi, everybody. Welcome to spring break. Congratulations on making it this far. I wanted to wait until you finished Friday before I give you any more information about pass no pass grading, the transition that our district will be making once we return back from spring break. So I'm going to talk to you about how this affects our district as a whole, and then I'll tell you how it affects our English classes specifically, my English classes specifically. So let's get into it. First thing we have to take into consideration are the grading periods. This pass no pass grading will affect the latter half, the second half of second semester. So everything from the first day of closure, Monday, March 16th, to the last day of school, May 29th. All of this, everything in purple, is pass no pass. Everything here is the first half of second semester, the former half of second semester, essentially, your Q3 progress report grade. That is frozen in time. I'll tell you about the details, behind the scenes Schoology details that makes that happen, but this grade is frozen in time and it's only viewable by Piedmont educators. So counselors, teachers, principals, administrators, we could see that Q3 grade. Colleges will not be able to see that Q3 grade. Again, it's just a progress report. So I will tell you how that affects, the grading of assignments from pre-closure in just a second. But right now, our eye is on the prize of getting that pass grade by the last day of school. There will be a progress report that comes out May 1st, and that will be that'll show you your progress towards. It'll say pass, no pass. Yes, so they will affect pass, no pass affects the latter half of second semester. And Q3 is kind of a moot point, right? So all those skills are still applicable to the rest of the semester for all your classes, all the skills and concepts you've been building on. But that Q3 grade is only viewable by Piedmont educators. So let's talk about what the union and the district agreed upon in terms of language for pass no pass. A pass is considered a minimum of 70% assignments completed. So I don't know what my total number of assignments would be. I don't know what N will be, that variable. But after your teachers reach the end of the school year, we're going to count up our assignments from the latter half of second semester. And if you achieved completion, achieved sufficient performance on 70% of that total number of assignments, then you receive a pass. Okay. And that will be determined on a teacher by teacher basis and on an assignment by assignment basis. Teachers will not assess you through the use of a letter grade. So you won't be seeing any letter grades in Schoology anymore. There will be no viewable total letter grade percentage like you have been seeing up until this point. Instead, we will be expected to see you demonstrate a good faith effort toward your schoolwork. I know that is a relatively vague phrase, but it's essentially in recognizing the fact that we know that when somebody doesn't try completely on an assignment, it's kind of relatively obvious, especially if we know if you've demonstrated full capacity of effort before now. We have some sort of standard of comparison. So good faith effort means that you're trying your best. Good faith effort means that you are meeting deadlines, right? There are still due dates, and if you're turning everything in late, I won't consider that a good faith effort, and I will consider that grounds for failure. And your other teachers will also be considering that grounds for failure, such as the nature of this contract language. Okay. So teachers may ask you to redo or revise work to be marked as complete. So I'll explain in a second how assignments will be marked as sufficient or not sufficient. If it's marked as not sufficient, you essentially have a chance to redo and revise and make sure you can get yourself to sufficient and secure a passing grade in a class. And last but not least, teachers will check for completion and provide feedback. But wait for this gray box to disappear. Go away. There we go. We will not provide points or letter grades on assignments. Again, the only grade you'll be receiving is sufficient or not sufficient. It won't be A, B, C, D. It won't be 8 out of 10, 7 out of 10. It will just be that. And behind the scenes, your teachers will be keeping track of your progress, right? And your trajectory towards passing. And you should be able to do that too, right? You could tell, am I completing about 70% or ideally more of my assignments to a sufficient degree? So let's talk about what exactly sufficient means. And a lot of that has to do with how that looks like on Schoology. So I texted out, an experimental pass-no-pass degree of completion scale, but the district has decided to agree on a binary scale for assessing assignments. So you can either get sufficient or you can either get not sufficient. Most of your teachers will just have one word, sufficient or not sufficient, but I've decided to also add a little bit of extra language to, better flesh out what those words mean. So sufficient means that it's freaking obvious. There's no denying that you have completed the assignment. Yay. That's 100% of the credit, essentially. Not sufficient is 0. So that means you didn't you didn't meet expectations, right? And you will be able to try again. And this is different than missing, right? You will receive a missing score if you just didn't turn in anything. That means it's missing. That will still read as a 0, but that's a different 0 than just not sufficient. Not sufficient means that you tried, but you didn't meet standards, but you didn't meet expectations, i.e. you could do better for your sake and for the sake of your group interaction projects, for the sake of your own benefit in the future so that we're preparing you for the next grade. Yes, that's what not sufficient is. Okay, so that's what's changing. Due dates are still the same. Places where you could find due dates are still the same. And expectations are still the same. Your teachers aren't going to be lowering expectation for you. We're not necessarily going to be, like saying, okay, now we only need you to try this hard on an assignment. No, we're still going to expect your best from you. It's just that we are going to assess that final product differently, right? And that assessment will be reflected with the scale, sufficient or not sufficient. Okay, so that's how that affects Schoology. Let's talk about our specific changes here. So Schoology is a robot. I imagine that there might be some anxieties out there wondering, well, how will I know if I'm on my way towards passing, or am I doing this right? Or can somebody help me? Schoology isn't giving me all the information I need. Your teachers are human. I am human, and we can answer those more nuanced, complex questions. And we're still here. We're still here. Our avenues for communication are still open. So whatever Schoology can't give you, right? Because the binary scale kind of doesn't necessarily respect the nuances of your performance. We can respect the nuances of those performances, and you could open up those conversations with us if you want any more information about anything, essentially, regarding our class. Any information that Schoology isn't programmed or ready to give you. So let's talk about changes for our class specifically. So let's first go after March 16th. So this is everything after the closure. I will be going back into all of those assignments and converting those grades from point scales, because all of those were on numeric scales, and I'm going to convert it to the sufficient, not sufficient scale. So I will go through and essentially, if you turned it in, you're going to be, and you did well enough to receive above a 70% on that assignment. I will give you a sufficient and then not sufficient if it's below. And missings will remain missing, right? And distance learning, I will be putting all of the assignments into a new category, a new grading category, distance learning. So our other categories are essays and tests, homework, classwork, and warm-ups and exit tickets. Those weightings will stay the same and untouched. That's how I'm going to freeze your Q3 grade so that I could keep that frozen in time. Distance learning will be 0%, and instead will just be an indication of how well you stayed on course towards a passing grade after closure. Okay, so it won't be changing the numbers of your Q3 grade, but I'm still going to be able to keep track, and you're still going to be able to keep track of your trajectory towards passing. Before March 16th, here's what's going to happen. Your grades are untouched, frozen in time, like I said. Feedback on tasks will be given upon request. This is frankly and transparently an opportunity for me to focus more on, designing awesome lessons and giving you feedback on recent assignments, on recent and upcoming assignments. I at this point, feedback on the poetry letters, feedback on the nonfiction syntheses, IRB reflections. I don't know how helpful that will be to you right now. I don't know if kids will be going out of their way to look at that. So I am going to take this opportunity to buy some time for myself to do other things that I think are more valuable right now, which is really create a stellar end of the year using, despite the fact that we're in an online learning mode. So I will still give feedback on those tasks, of course, but you have to ask for it. You have to say, hey, Mr. Barlin, can I get some feedback on X, Y, and Z. And I'll say, sure, and I'll go in. So feedback will be on a case-by-case basis. Poetry letters are a little different. I am reading all of those because I love reading them and they fill me with joy. So I am going to still be reading those. Yes, yes, feedback on those tasks upon request. But I will also still be going into those assignments, and those will also be converted to sufficient, not sufficient. Because at that point, those are hairs that splitting hairs at that point will be kind of arbitrary. If you got an A or a B, it's sufficient to me, because at the end of the day, that's not going to affect that's not going to bring you away from a passing grade. Okay, so feedback on tasks is upon request. I'm reading all your poetry letters, and essentially Q3 grades are largely frozen in time. Okay, so let's talk about action projects. Like I've said before, time and time again, execution is the only phase that is being removed from our action projects. That additional time has been put to preparation, and you could have your planning time bleed into your preparation time if you'd like. And I'll explain that again when we get back from spring break. So execution has been removed. Everything else is still the same. I'm also designing the organizers, the steps, so that it's easy for you and me to identify whether you've hit sufficient completion standards, right? Did you answer all the questions thoroughly? And yes or no will be pretty clear, the way that those organizers have been designed. Okay, so if you're ever wondering, what are we doing for English? This is all we're doing for English. This will be the total focus of our class, which was always the plan, right? Even before we went virtual. So sophomores, we finished all our text. Juniors, the junior teachers kind of agreed that we would all get one text not to teach, and I chose the things they carried, which was supposed to be our next text, and we weren't really going to do anything crazy new with it that we haven't already done with Their Eyes Are Watching God. So I'm satisfied with reading our text, and I hope you are too. And the sophomores really definitely should be satisfied. All right, so action projects is our focus for the rest of the year. And last but not least, allow me to be transparent about all of this. There's language going around saying, we're past OPS. We don't have to try as much anymore, right? Some of the teachers are even saying that. And I'm like, hold on, wait, everybody, wait. Even before we considered closing for the rest of the year, even before we considered going virtual, our plan for English was always to follow this trajectory, end with action, and realistically and meaningfully synthesize English skills and concepts with social justice skills and concepts. English oftentimes is the discipline that gets the flack for being, loosey-goosey, fake, about unicorns, not about the real world. And I feel like that this is a particularly unique opportunity for people to see, realize, and experience English being real. Right? English being real and having tangible carryover into the next year, especially if you're going to be seniors and you have to plan community action projects, especially if you're going to be juniors, right? And we have to start to consider, how exactly can we get involved in the community now that we're upperclassmen? This is still real. And I hope that you are still devoting yourself to this class, not for the past necessarily, but for your own benefit. Because I'm still going to be creating experiences that are meaningful. I'm not using online learning as an excuse to shirk off work or to try less, and I hope that you reciprocate that effort. And I have this picture here of a generic letter of recommendation. And I want to stress that I don't want letters of recommendation to be the carrot on the stick that gets you through the rest of this year. I don't want you to say, I should try hard because I do want that letter of recommendation, Mr. Brown. That would be really kind of sad if that was like the sole reason why you were going to continue progress in this class. I don't want that to be, again, the carrot on the stick for you. But again, to be transparent, it is a factor. It is a factor. If you start to dip out of our class or visibly, noticeably, undeniably try less in my class, all assignments are being turned in late and subpar relatively, then please don't ask me for a letter of recommendation because I will tell you no. I write letters of recommendation for just people that I truly believe deserve my recommendation. I've said no to kids before here. I've said no to kids in Philly. I will do it again because I feel comfortable saying no when I'm saying yes to kids that really, truly do deserve my recommendation. And I could write them an authentic, genuine letter. So it's a factor. It's a factor. Even if you've been, on the ball up until this point for the first 75% of the year, and now that we're in online learning, you drop the ball. I'll still say no. I will still say no if you ask me for a letter recommendation. It's a factor. It is a factor. It shouldn't be the factor behind why you are still trying in my class and why you're still trying in other classes. Again, the reason why should have to do with the fact that this is a meaningful experience. And if you need me to help explain to you how exactly this could be meaningful to you, then I'd love to open up that conversation as well. Alrighty, information dump over. If you have any general questions for the good of the order, questions that you think other people would enjoy hearing the answers to, please ask them in our Pass No Pass Questions Schoology forum. That way other people will be able to see your questions and will be able to see my answers. And if you have any questions that are specific and pertain only to you, you could go ahead and ask me those through Remind. It really is easier and faster if you text me through Remind as opposed to email. It's just more convenient on several different fronts. Okay, so go ahead and text me there. We still have some people who aren't on Remind. If you haven't been on Remind, I have sent you an invitation through text and email. But if you lost that for whatever reason, you can still text, at E56Barlin to 81010 if you're a junior, and then E34 Barlin if you're a sophomore. If you mess that up, it's not the end of the world. I'll just have to switch your classes behind the scenes. But yes, 5-6 for juniors, 3-4 for juniors. Alrighty, that's that. Happy spring break. I'll see you when we get back.